Okay, back to Choshen Mishpat, Shir 19, after a break that you had from Shiurim. I'm sure you missed me, so you have me back. I'm going to go through the first four Sa'ifim of סימן Zayin, focus on the practical, and I'm going to give you two questions at the end to think of. You don't have to give me an answer, it's not a test, but think about them. Okay. The tour begins, סימן Zayin, with a announcement. Hilchasa Hezek Re'iyah Shmei Hezek. The halacha is gepasken the Hezek Re'iyah Shmei Hezek. The reason why the Torah has to point this out is very simple, because there are those that hold that Hezek Re'iyah is not really considered a Hezek, but the Torah paskins Hilchasa Hezek Re'iyah Shmei Hezek. Therefore, since we just spent the last four Simanim, Kufnun Gimel, Kufnun Dalet, Kufnun Hey, Kufnun Vav, dealing with different elements of Hezekis, among them Hezek Re'iyah, and how to, when one person has issues of getting a hezek, the mazik, the nizak, who's responsible for different hezekis. Now we're moving into Kufnun Zayin, where we're going to start dealing with hezek re'iyah within partners, within people who are living in the same chatzar, etc. And that is where Kufnun Zayin starts. We're essentially going back to the beginning of what we learned in Kufnun Gimel, Kufnun Dalet about hezek re'iyah, and now we're going to be dealing with it on this, in the realm of shutfim. That means we're going to deal with shutfim, shutfas b'karkע, deal with the responsibilities of shutfim, and for there it moves on. These are the simanim that we're going to be dealing with now. So the Mechaber doesn't make this announcement. Bichlal, the Mechaber takes out all the exciting statements that the Tur has in different places and just starts straight from the halacha. But the Tur, like everybody knows, the beginning of Shulchan Aruch is Gaber Kari, is one of the examples. The Tur begins with it. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't give you the whole introduction. So, therefore, if you have a chatzar shutfim, that means a chatzar which belongs to two people, both of them have houses open to it, and we're talking about, obviously, we discussed it last year in the Chaseiros and Barichus, when we're talking about chatzeres, we're talking about the chatzeres b'oisam hayomim, in those days when everybody would do reiv tashmishim b'chatzar before the days of air conditioner, and there was nothing, it was hot inside, and everything you did was did outside. The only thing you did inside was probably sleeping. Except for the summer and it was too hot inside, maybe you even slept outside. So that's a chatzar should be a meim. Just have to remember that, because today it's hard to look at the chatzar shutfim and think of it as that they do all their tashmishim there. The only examples which you could think of today of a chatzar shutfim would be the old style bungalow colonies, which have these little places where you can't really do anything in the house. And you could go there on a regular night and everybody's doing everything outside, from picnics to hammocks and everything else. But
still choose to want privacy.
That's if you have your own chatzar.
No, but if you have a chatzar nowadays,
it's very uncommon.
You can't force.
Yeah, you could. The question is how much. The concept of chatzar shutfim today would apply more in two scenarios. This is what I wanted to point out. One would be if each person has their own chatzar behind his house. So it's not a chatzar shutfim, the classic chatzar shutfim that belongs to both together, but rather each one has his house and each one has his property behind his house, and there is a wall between them or a gate between them, whatever it is. Over there, people are more comfortable doing things that they would not do if it would be a shared chatzar. Or when you have in certain apartment buildings, not so common in New York, but in warmer places it is, where you have long porches. A full wall of the house is a porch. A lot of times between the porches you don't have a full separation, and over there also you could have this question of chatzar shutfim, and you would have this would be common more in such scenarios. Anyways, back to what's in Shulchan Aruch. So we have a chatzar shutfim and it has din chalukah. Whatever din chalukah means can be discussed in סימן Aleph Sif Gimel. This is what the Smet tells you. It means don't get too hung up on this. The Smet says you're going to learn it in a few simanim. So whether it has din chalukah or if it does not have din chalukah, that means halachically it's not enough to split it, which is essentially daled amas al daled amas for each one, and somehow they still decided to do the chalukah between them. Each one could force the other person to build a wall between them to prevent hezek re'iyah. And even if for many years there was no wall between them, and one person decides one day to wake up and do it, one could force the other one, and we don't say that there is a chazakah for a hezek. Just want to point out over here something important, because we're talking about chalukah. The Mata Shimon, which is similar to the Knesset Agdela, often the same family, the Knesset Agdela, Dvar HaMishpat, Mata Shimon, we discussed it in the past, says right in the beginning of the Siman that if you're going to do the chalukah in such a way, you're going to put the wall up in such a way that it's going to create a problem for the entrance to the chutzner. Let's say the entrance to the chutzner is right in the middle, and you want to split the chutzner that way, and then suddenly the door is not going to be wide enough to be able to enter, or there is a water well in the middle which is also going to be affected by it, then you can't be koy for the other person to do the chalukah that way. You're going to have to figure out how to do a chalukah differently. But you can't use this kfiyah to do a chalukah with a wall. Doesn't apply when the damage that is going to happen to something which is going to have to be used by both. The Ramah continues and adds on this that where we said that you could be koy for him, that this applies even if the minhag is in the city not to have any walls between shutfim. And even if one taina is that he has a chazakah and the other one was meichalim, we still ignore it. Why is it that we do not say there's a chazakah? The Smeh right away points out, hezek re'iyah is bari hezekoi tadir. It's a clear, constant, undisputable hezek, and therefore we do not follow the minhag. The Be'er HaGoyla in Ois Bey says, what's the reason why you don't do a chazakah? He says, being that each person is mazik the other person, but the hezek is done without an actual act. Hezek re'iyah is not an act. It's not like you're opening a window, but they're talking about each person is doing mazik without a maiseh. Therefore, you can't be machzik in it. And the Beit HaGoel doesn't explain what the logic behind it is, but we already know from before. We have the whole discussion, if there's no maiseh that you could be moiche against, then to prevent somebody from doing it, you can't do a chazakah either. So seemingly that is the logic of the Be'er HaGoyla, because he says if you do an action, like if you open a window or if you knock down the wall, I can stop you. But since we're both in the same property together, each one of us has rights to it, and you're being mazik me the whole time, and I have no way of stopping you, so therefore also you have no way of being machzik and claim that I did a mechila. Now, what helps over here? It's mashma that only mechila with Adam helps. The Smeh adds over here, he brings from the Tur, not only tainas mechila with Adam works, but obviously if he claims macharta, which both of them we already discussed in the past, both of these also work, and obviously it doesn't work if you don't have any proof to it. You still need Adam. Comes the question, Bichlal, why does chazakah over here doesn't help, which we already discussed before. We mentioned why does chazakah doesn't help. Yeah, that Smeh over here brings another reason why the chazakah doesn't help, similar to what the Be'er HaGoyla says. That, in other words, by chaloin we do say there's a chazakah. Over here we don't say the chazakah, so we have the explanation of Be'er HaGoyla that it's without a maiseh. The Smeh brings from the Tur, very simple. Each person claims that the other person is being mazik him. We're going to see it. It's towards the middle of the Tur. It's not in the beginning of the Tur. It's more siftas, if yud in the Tur. Being that each person is mazik the other person. So one person could say, I didn't want to start the mechaeh because just like I'm being mazik you, you're being mazik me, and therefore I don't want to be the one to rattle the relationship over here, because we're going to be neighbors for a long time. I don't want to call you to Bezdin, so I was hoping that you're going to be the one to initiate the war. And therefore, but you didn't, and I gave up on waiting, so therefore I had no choice what to do. It doesn't mean that I was meichel you. The second reason why it's different than a chaloin is because a chaloin, the main purpose of a chaloin is to be able to look through the window. For oira, not to look through the window. It means the main issue of a chaloin is to enter, light to enter, not to you to sit and look out the window. Unless you have a beautiful view, you're sitting on the on the foot of a mountain, on the top of a mountain, and you have a river and everything else, then you enjoy the view. But otherwise, the purpose of a window, in those days, the purpose of windows when there was no lights was to bring in the sunlight into the house. So therefore, hezek, but by a chotzer, so therefore the hezek riyah is not a hezek tadir. Because we know already that's also a halacha to look. That's clear, even in a small chaloin or whatever it is, still also to look into somebody else's property. But in a but if it's a chotzer, the hezek riyah is constant. Yeah, that's the next point. The next point we're going to do, we did mention that mechila over here, it says you need edim. Right? The Smer right away points out that if there's edim, you don't need a kinyan, even though by mechila, even though by kutra you need a kinyan. Kutra is a big hezek. And over there, if there's mechila, you need a kinyan for the mechila. There's a whole discussion when mechila needs a kinyan and when not. Over here, the Smer says it's not mamish like kutra, even though it's compared, even though, and this is the Smer, just remember that the Smer was written on the Shulchan Aruch after the Prisha and Drisha were written on the Tur. A lot of times, if you see a cryptic Smer or a Smer that looks like it just says a half a statement, you have to look back at the Prisha, Drisha, and you'll be able to see much more explanations on it. So over here, this concept that kutra is not, it's not mamish, hezek riyah is not mamish like kutra, so good, so it's a statement, it looks like a achroza, fine, cool, it's not mamish like kutra. You look in the Prisha, he'll explain to you. Over there, he explains what this is. He says, in the Tur, the Rosh brings that in the Tur he brings from the Rosh that hezek riyah is similar to kutra. So the Prisha over there explains it's not exactly the same as kutra. The Tur didn't mean to say that it's mamish like kutra, that you can't make a chazaka and you need a kinyan and mechila with a kinyan. Rather, all that the Tur wanted to say is that kutra is a hezek tadir. And therefore, not that it's a hezek godel, rather it's a hezek tadir. It's a constant hezek, and therefore, mechila, therefore, you can't make a chazaka. That's the reason why you don't need a kinyan. If you look in the Sivis gives you a different reason why you don't need a kinyan. Be'urim Sivkot Nalev, he brings actually from the Rosh, that being that you're talking about a tvias momoin, it's a financial claim. What's a financial claim? You want them to pay for a wall. By a financial claim, mechila works. By a damage claim, mechila doesn't. I mean, mechila without a kinyan works. Because that's what for that kind of financial claim, you could say, I have edim that there was a mechila. What did you waive? You waived my financial obligation to you. Yeah. Interestingly, based on this nesivis, it could work that the person could say, I can still put up a wall, but you can't. But the other person could say, well, I was moichel you the financial claim, and therefore I can't charge you for the wall. But I could still put up a wall, and I can still put it even on your chelik, unless he claims that the mechila momenis is also the 3 tvachim that you have to take from the other guy's property. Happens to be, if you look in the Erech Lechem, which is one also written on the Shulchan Aruch, he writes that you do need a kinyan for this mechila. He's chaylik on everybody else. You do need a kinyan for this mechila, and edim is not enough. He's chaylik on everybody else. The Erech Lechem is one of the is not long after the Beis Yosef in generational. The Gra also, the Gra who came before the Nesivis also writes that it's mitzad moment, very short, also cryptic in the Gra. That's basically it's mitzad because it's moments. Therefore, the mechila does not need kinyan. What's enough kamina whether you say it's mitzad mamoin or you say it's mitzad or mitzad? Each one's being mazik, mazik the other person, or if you say that it's because you did a meiser and not like the Bera Goyla. Yes, I mentioned one nafkamina if it's about if you could still put up the wall later, if the mechila is for the hezek riyah that I don't want a wall, or the mechila is that I just don't have to pay for it. There's another nafkamina. When only one person is busy being mazik somebody else. How is only one person being mazik somebody else? And this is I'm going to get to later as part of a question. Let's say whatever reason it is, only one person is mazik the other one. By Hezek Riyah, when one wall is higher than the other one, when one person is taller than the other one. You have a short person on one side, and you have a tall person on the other side. One person is 6'6", another person is 5'6". So then only one could see on a 4 amos walk, if you should have Chaim Noah, is 6 feet. So you could see from one that the one on one side could see, and the one on the other can't see. So one is mazik the other one. The nizek was not meicher. So according to if you follow the simple explanation of the Rosh, that it's like kutra, and you say it's mitzad hezek, that it's a hezek gadol, yeah, then and you can't be moichel. Then you have a mitzad hezek gadol, you can't be moichel. Then over here you can't be moichel. If you say it's because each one is mazik the other one, like the Smeh says, over here only one person is mazik the other one. So again, you could say that you could say that the person did waive it by him not saying anything. He waived his rights to it was a mechila because he wasn't moiche. And so that's and if you say that it's because according to the Beit HaGoyla each one's mazik the other one, but it's without any ma'aseh. So there really will be the same thing over here, even though if one is being the same logic, only one is being mazik the other one, and even though it's without if it's without ma'aseh, over here I'm not exactly sure if it would fall into one category, the other one if shika would work as mechila or not. So I'll leave it hanging like that because I don't have a clarity on that. Ulam HaMishpat, one of the 11 Mefarshim in this blue set over here, Sifkot and Aleph brings from the Marashdam that if each person is mazik the other person, but one is mazik more than the other one, yeah, so it's not that they're both equally mazik. For whatever reason, one is mazik more than somehow one is mazik more than the other one, then the one who's more mazik has a chazaka. Why? Because it's not equal hazek, because that one could claim to the other one. You could say, the fact is, I was mazik you much more and you were mazik me. So you can't say it, you were waiting for me to come to Bezdin. But the Ulam HaMishpat says it doesn't make sense. I think it must be the Marashdam only used it as a sniff for whatever case he was discussing over there, but not actually to make it as a psak halacha. Yeah, that's for a similar reason. Yeah. Over there, it's not the chiyuv. The reason is because of the chiyuv. There's a chiyuv on the person. Yeah, but over here the shaila is if there's a chazaka or not mitzvah, there's a chiyuv. Over there we're talking about if how much each person is responsible to pay. Over here, and over there also is a discussion if one person has a bigger. Some people say that it's not mamash. It's not mamash always that you could. We'll get to it soon. It's not always that it's equal amounts of money.
One person uses his chater more. That's enough. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Marashdam says that's one of the ways. Yeah, one person uses it a lot more, and one person uses it a lot less. That means the person who's using.
Who's being more mazik? When he uses it more, so you can see it.
That's a question. Who's being mazik more when you have who's using it? Could also be. The Ktsas over here goes into an interesting topic on the side. We'll call it a side topic to it. Could a person claim if one person says, "I already prepaid you for the half of the wall"? Could you say could easy neman betainas paraiti or not? And he says, you want to put up a wall, gesundheit. I already gave you, the wall cost $5,000. I already gave you $2,500 a month ago. Build the wall, but don't come to me for cash because I already gave you. The Ktsas says he's only neman after the wall was already built. Why? Because if Reuven builds the whole wall from his own money and then he comes and tainas to Shimon, refund me half, Shimon could say paraiti because then it's only tainas moment. It's only tainas moment. He's neman to say paraiti, and it's after zman peroin. Nobody is chazak and perei zman choivei betoich zman. Zman Pirah, and is after it's done. But if it's before the wall was even built, or before the wall started to build, he's no longer trusted to say Paraiti, because it's not a Tviyas Chayv, financial Chayv. It's a Chiyuv from Bezdin. And you can't taina after Maisa Bezdin before it is done. And the Beis Yaakov, also on Choshen Mishpat, says that this is clearly written in the Rameh. If you look in the Rameh, you'll see it clearly. There's another din that the Tur mentions over here in the beginning of the Siman, which the Mechaber does not say. And this is because the Mechaber discusses it a little bit, the Ramah brings it a little bit in a different place. The Ramah says, this is the Tur brings the Ramah, that if one person was Neschayev and Bezdin to build a wall between him and his friend, and he didn't build it, and then came Ganovim and stole, because he didn't build the wall. He's chayav to pay everything that was stolen. And he says, that the Rameh says the same thing applies to any hefsid mammon which was caused based on something which you should have done, and you were priorly warned, hisru b'mitchila, you were priorly warned to fix it and you didn't. The Torah says the Rosh doesn't agree with this. Why? Because you have a din that if somebody goes and there's a pirate's gather, breaks the gate, where and there's a cow, your neighbor's cow is in his backyard, and you go and you break the gate and the cow runs away, you potter midinei adam. Therefore, the Torah says, based on that, if you didn't build the wall, you should also be potter, not like the Rameh. The Bach right away asks the question, doesn't make any sense. He says, by a behema, the behema goes out by itself. Yeah, and if you look at the Rosh discusses by mechitzas akerem shenifretza, when you have two people have, one person has one kinds of fruits growing, and the other person has kramim, has grapes, and there's a mechitza between them, and now the mechitza fell out, so therefore and you were supposed to and you told him to fix the mechitza and he didn't, and therefore the grapes continued growing and went into and created the issue of kilayim. Over there, the Rosh says that you're chayev. Why? Because your mammon is mixed in with the other person's mammon, and it's bari hazeka, and it's considered like a maaseh, therefore you're chayev. And the Rosh says, but when it comes to pirates bifnei behemas chaveirei, then it's not considered a maaseh. Why? Because it's considered a maaseh, but it's not considered that you did the action because the animal was darkolatzis. And therefore the Bach says, what the Rameh says, is exactly like mechitzas akerem, not like pirates gather. Why? Because the ganovim is bari hazeka, and you chayev right away. And he points out that the goyim paskin like that. And where do we know about this goyim? This is already mentioned in the Beis Yosef and Siman Kuf Nun Hey, and the Ramah brings it in the Kuf Nun Hey in the end of the Siman. And the goyim hold that it's mamash gira delay over there. Yeah, and therefore you chayev. It happens to be the Beis Yosef over there doesn't really disagree so much with it. The Beis Yosef over here does disagree and say it's not mamash gira delay. Therefore the Bach says, since the Tur, so to speak, misunderstood the Rosh, so we paskin like the Rameh and not like the Tur. Over here it says, why? So according to the Rameh, let's say we follow the Rameh, that if it's after Hasra, then you're chayev for Hezekis. The Prisha right away points out to you, don't think that this means Asra and Bezdin. Usually Asra means Asra and Bezdin. It doesn't mean Asra and Bezdin. It just means you gave him notice. You gave him notice beforehand. He tells him, you better take care of this because it's going to cause me a hezek. And he doesn't listen, that's already enough. So therefore, if you tell him, if Bezdin tells him to build a wall, or you tell him it's time for you to build a wall, and he didn't listen to you, that's already considered enough of Asra for this din, you become chayev. That is essentially the topics of Sif Aleph, with the extra story that the Tur brings over here, the extra case that is not in Shulchan Aruch and Sif Aleph. We'll move to Sif Beis. Sif Beis now discusses a chaser she'ein boi din chalukah. Because in Sif Aleph we're talking about a chaser she'yesh boi din chalukah, which they were, or a chaser she'ein boi din chalukah, which they agreed to split between themselves. If a chaser she'ein boi din chalukah, the mechaber starts with a din if they decided that they're going to make a chalukah, but they didn't do a chalukah yet, but they already made a kinyan that they're going to do a chalukah, they can still change their mind and retract it. Why? Because it's a kinyan dvarim. Why is it a kinyan dvarim? A kinyan has to have something on which it should rest, on which it should apply. Should have for the kinyan to effectuate a change, it has to have something physical, real on which it could rest. And a kinyan that we are going to be chayla to divide the property is all words, because it's not landing on anything specifically. That's how the Sma explains it. But if each person, the Mechaber says, if each person already decided what spot is going to be his after the chalukah, and then they made a kinyan, then the kinyan helps, even though they still did not actually do the chalukah, because they already agreed the east side is going to be mine, the west side is going to be yours. It's already, because over there it's already, there is on what the kinyan should land. This the Smed doesn't explain it here, it's in the Prisha. It explains it in the Prisha. Each side, it's a kinyan chalipin. What is it? Before that, each person owned 100% of the property together. Each person had rights to the whole property. So now that we decide the east side is mine, the west side is yours, east side is Reuven, west side is Shimon's. So now, when they made the kinyan, and they already agreed each side, so when they made the kinyan, it's a kinyan chalipin. Reuven says, I'm giving up my rights to your side, and Shimon says, I'm giving up my rights to your side. And it became a chalipin. Each person acquired from the other one the rights that he had in that person's property.
What is chalipin like?
Exchange.
I'm buying your part, you're buying mine? Is there a significance to the fact that he's saying chalipin nafka? I'm selling you mine part and you're selling me your part.
Yeah, but what's the kinyan? He says, the kinyan was not that they said v'loshen mechira. They were made a kinyan sudar. Yeah. So he says, but what did it affect? The effect was, it became a chalipin. That's how the Prisha explains it. The effect was, that's how there's on what to land. The kinyan has to have on what to land. It landed on a piece of land. Each person's, the chalipin, because each person, the kinyan landed on each person by him acquiring the rights of the other person to that place. The Oitzer HaMishpat is one of this generation, says that if each person made a kinyan sudar on the part which I will receive later, even though it's a davar shaloi b'lo'elam, it might work. Yeah, if you look to understand it a little bit better, you look in the Pamoinei Zav. Pamoinei Zav, Sifkat and Aleph says that if the kinyan sudar was not stam, but each person is makne me'achshav to the other person, his chusim, in the chelik from which I will remove myself down the line, I will be masalik myself down the line, says maybe it's not a kinyan dvar. Why? It's more like a pshara, and a pshara kinyan works. And he says, but if it's b'toiras is chayvus, that I was mechayev myself to make a chalukah, then it does work. And the Oitzer HaMishpat says that it's not the Oitzer HaMishpat says the same thing, like I just mentioned before. Even though you might think it's a davar shalei b'la'olam, that I'm going to make a kinyan on the part which I'm going to acquire. It's not really davar shalei b'la'olam. Why? Because the land is there. It's only a matter of an action that's missing to make the split, and therefore it's fine. But both of them, say the Pamoinei Zav and say the Oitzer HaMishpat later, both of them remain in tzarichio and iftake. Such a kinyan would work or not.
What's the sort that pshara is different?
Uh-huh.
The environment by pshara works.
No, a pshara, you make a kinyan, it works because the way that that's how he says. He says it might work. He doesn't say for sure it works. He says it might work in such a scenario within pshara.
What's the significance of pshara that it makes it an issue of kinyan?
Because you're making a kinyan on an agreement of that we're going to, each one of us is going to give up something.
Why is it different on these types?
Because it's not a hischayvus that I'm going to do something and there's nothing that's going to happen. The thing is here. Dvar HaMishpat brings an interesting question. It says, if you look in Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph, over there, the Ramah says that if there is if they made a kinyan not to be choylek, it's not considered a kinyan dvarim. And they cannot retract it. Therefore, he says, the chayla, the Ramah should have been choylek over here, just like he's choylek in over there, that if you make a kinyan shaloi lachlik, it's chal. Maybe if you make a kinyan lachlik, it should also be chal. So why over here the Ramah doesn't say anything? It just accepts the mechaber's statement that it's a kinyan dvarim and does it that way.
In the mechaber and kufa and aleph would say that it wouldn't work.
The
mechaber and kufa and aleph would also say that it wouldn't work if they make a kinyan not to be chaylik.
So it seems like the exact reading, the exact lashon. I'll read you now. The Ramah doesn't say anything of it. The Mechaber doesn't discuss anything of it. The Ramah brings it over there. The Ramah says, where is it? It says, Ein yochel levatel, the kinyan.
What would be the reason why it's getting done over there? The touch is already here. It's not like over here where you're talking about future.
But so that's what the Knesset Agdela over here brings in, and the Dvar HaMishpat brings from the Knesset Agdela. And he says that there's a difference between a kinyan to do something. A kinyan to make a chalukah is a kinyan to do a maisa. Similar, but by a kinyan shaloi lachloik, it's a kinyan not to do a maisa. And therefore it's different. That's what he brings from the Knesset Agdela. But if you look at the Pamayne Zav, he was a little bit different explanation. He says, by a kinyan shaloi lachloik, what happens? There's an actual action happening here. The Knesset Agdela says it's no action versus action. The Pamayne Zav says also no action versus action, but the other way around. He says, by a kinyan shaloi lachloik, each person did an action. He was maknet to the other person a right to use his property, entry rights. So therefore, there is on what the kinyan should land. But in the kinyan lachloik, each person has already a shibud has a shibud of some sort, entry rights on the other person's property. And by you making a kinyan, what are you doing? You're sachakel removing a shibud. By you removing a shibud, it's something in the air. It's in luft. So you can't really. There's nothing for the kinyan on which to land. And therefore, he says, he brings from the Sefer Damasek Eliezer on Choshen Mishpat, that if they first made a kinyan shaloi lachlik, and then they made a kinyan lachlik, obviously the first kinyan remains and the second kinyan doesn't, because the first kinyan had what to rest on and the second kinyan didn't. Anyways, the Mechaber continues over here in Sif Beis that if one person went holach be'atzmai, walked and was machzik in the part that he wants to, and the other person also walked and was machzik in the place that in the chelik that he wants to, even if it didn't make a kinyan anymore, even if it didn't make a kinyan bichlal, it already can't change their minds. The Shach just tells you, go look in the Agoyes Maimonides. What is he referring to? That over there, the Agoyes Maimonides is mashma that you don't even need a chazak, but halach is enough. Just did the hiluch in his area and decided which area is his is already enough, and you don't need the chazak. And the Beis Yaakov over here points out that the Agoyes Maimonides doesn't mean to say that if one person did hiluch himself without a chazak and ignored the other person, that's already enough. Rather, that if it's only hiluch, then both of them have to do the hiluch. And then you don't need the chazakah and you don't need the kinyan. But if one person did hiluch plus chazakah, a good chazaka, paratz godel nal, whatever works for the chazaka, then that works that that Reuven got the place that he made a chazaka on, even though Shimon didn't. Shimon didn't do his side, and Shimon automatically gets the remaining half.
What's the walk?
Huh?
What's the walking doing?
Marking your property.
Okay. The walking the property just to make the boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh?
It sounds like the hiluch itself makes the kinyan.
From the Beis Yosef, it's mashma. The hiluch itself makes a kinyan, but I'm saying the Beis Yaakov says it doesn't apply to one person. It just wants to point out it applies to both. The hiluch makes a kinyan, but only if both do it together.
You use lashon zevatzim. It speaks about even one of them.
Yeah, but that's what the Beis Yaakov says. It doesn't mean, he explains, he says it doesn't dafka mean, and it happens to be that Aruch HaShulchan also agrees with that explanation. The hiluch by itself, for one person, is not going to be enough. Zebatzim is medayik, that it means that each person did it himself. And the Goyis Mamini's point is that if you have hiluch plus chazaka, that helps for one person. Not that this is holach, not if it's hiluch alone. The Mechaber says, then continues, says, Yesh Imrim. It happens to be, if you look in Dvar Mishpat, he says that being that the Yesh Imrim is brought without anybody else, obviously halach is like the Yesh Imrim, that even if you made a chazaka shaloi b'fnei chaveiroi, and the other person didn't tell him lei chazek kni, and even if only one person made a chazaka, it works. Why does only when one person does it, it works? When in mechira it would not work. The סימן says right away, it's not like mechira. Each person over here is clarifying what chelik is this. So the moment one person made a chazaka, even if the other one didn't tell him lei chazek kni, even shalei b'fnei chaveiroi, it already works. And if you want to go into a whole discussion if that סימן is actually lahalacha or not, you look in the Erech Shai over here, and I don't really have enough time to go through it now. If that wife, one person alone was machzik without shalei b'fnei chaveiroi and said lei chazek kni, it still works, and it's not like mechira because each person is mevarer his chelik. The Ramah concludes over here and says regarding mekaymas of Beis HaKnesses, go look in Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph. Right? Why does he point it out over here? Simply because the Beis Yosef brings a whole discussion about mekaymas and Beis HaKnesses over here. The Ramah decided it doesn't belong in Kuf Nun Zayin, but it belongs in Kuf Ayin Aleph. So just so you shouldn't think that the Ramah missed this whole chunk in the Beis Yosef, he tells you, Beis Yosef put it here, I put it somewhere else. Just look for it over there in Kuf Ayin Aleph. Sif Gimel, who pays? Yeah, and who gives up the land? The Mechaber says the wall is built on both of their properties equally, and both of them pay equally. And one person cannot say, this chatzar didn't have din chalukah. I wouldn't have agreed. I only agreed to do the chalukah with you in the chatzar shem b'din chalukah and end up with less than daled. Because you were annoying and you wanted to have this wall up. Now, not only am I not going to have my 3x3 ames, you already taken another 3 tefachim out of me. So, mamish, now I have to walk sideways when I go into my property, into my backyard. I'm not ready for that. I agreed to do I agreed to do it, but you have got to absorb the whole 6 tefachim or whatever the shear is. 6 tefachim is the biggest shear when it comes to the wall, and you have to absorb the whole cost. He says that doesn't fly, and you can't have such a taina. The Mechaber then continues, even if one person has double in the chatzar than the other person A has double than the other person, that means the chatzar, let's say, is not a square, so it splits 50-50, but whichever way it ends up being that one person has more space, so therefore has double. Let's say it's like a one person has ends up with 2/3 of the chatzar, one person ended up with 1/3 of the chatzar. Then you would say the person who has a bigger share of the chatzar should give more space and more money. The Mechaber says no, and that is from the Rameh. And the Rameh, the Tur over there explains the reason is because each person has a chiyuv to remove from himself the hiazik riyah. That's how the Smeh Sifkot Nches phrases it. And the chiyuv of siluk hezek re'iyah is equal in both. So therefore, since the chiyuv of siluk is on both equally, the payment is also on both equally. In the Prisha, it also, the way the Prisha explains it is that each person, it's not only regarding the payment, it's also regarding the amount of land that each person loses. Yeah, because from the Mechaber you could understand it only applies to the payment, but maybe regarding amount of land, each person should lose proportionate. No, the Prisha says no. It's also regarding the amount of land. If the wall is 6 tefachim wide, each person loses 3 tefachim. Logically, why should that even fly? That when you have it, I mean, I understand siluk hezek is an idea. At the end of the day, one person is going to have more hana than the other person. The person who has a bigger property is going to end up with more hana from the wall than the person who has a smaller property, because he has a lot more space to run around. Also, if you look at it mitzad hezek, when you have a shutaf, whoever is nana more pays more. So he says, Taka, if you would, the Oitzer HaMishpat says, Taka, if you would be done at mitzad shutfus, it should be each person should give his part. But if you done from mitzad niski shchenim, then no, each person is being mazik an equal amount of hezek. The hezek is equal, even though the amount of space that hana is different. But the kasha is stronger than the teretz, and we'll just leave it at that. If you look in Mata Shimoin, he brings from the Rashbash, Shas Chuvas Rashbash Siman Reish Samach Tes, that the only time that this din applies, that each person gives equally, is only when the only reason you made the wall is for Hazak Kriya. It means nobody's planning on using the wall. Nobody's putting up any basketball hoops or anything else on the wall, or hanging stuff, or putting beams for a sukkah on the wall. But if each person is going to be using the wall for his benefit, it's no longer mitzad niske shchenim. It falls into the category of shutfus. The person who has more hanoah from it, who has a bigger property, pays more. He said, but why did you make? He says they made a decision between them. If it will be has a kriya, we could make a thin wall. The Maise, we're already putting up a wall. I'm going to build a garage on my side. I'm going to do something. I'm going to use the wall for something productive. So then, being that I'm using it, and it's no longer just for has a kriya, then you do it. In Pamoine Zov, it brings from Eksaviat Kadmoin. That if one person owned the whole chutzner, and he sold half of the chutzner to somebody else, and now they come, now he has to put up a wall for has a kriya, right? The buyer has to pay the whole wall. Why? Because when the seller sold it, he sold it with an understanding that the other person until now didn't have to do anything. I'm selling it to you. You are now the hezek is being created by you showing up over here, even though I'm the mazik also. But you are creating it. By you buying it, you're also buying the liability, and the whole wall has to be on the person's wall. And he brings a Ráya from it, from Siman Kufnun Chesif Beis. If somebody sells a gina lechavere ben shar ginois, that's murevas and moed ginois, yesh aymirim that the lekeach pays. The lekeach is the one who is chayev to be goyder it.
When you say buying nothing, when you say buying nothing, like he's selling him the thing and the rights to privacy in the thing.
He sells him the rights to privacy, and he also says, I have no problem if you're going to put up a wall on your property, on your responsibility. That's what he says. Listen, that's why everything, if you write it in the contract, you're not going to have any problems. The Ramah continues over here, if one person is rich, one person is poor, one of them wants to build it fully in his own side, and he wants to use it for it himself, and the other person is not going to, the poor person is not going to be able to use it. So the poor person can't say, hey, wait until I have enough money to pay, because I also want to have rights to use it. And he could do it right away. This is based on the Smeh. This is how the Smeh understands the Seif. And if you look in the Prisha, Sifkot and Zayin, it's even explained much better. And the rich person who's building it doesn't have to make the full width and doesn't have to make the full height. He's doing whatever he wants. Based on he's the one who's paying for it. He's the one who could do whatever he wants. And after it's done, if the Hezek Riyah is gone, the ani cannot have any tinus. I don't like the color of the bricks. I don't like the style. I don't like how fat you did it. I don't like how skinny you did it. It's not a problem. That's what the Gra over here writes. It was Masalik the Hezek. You can't have any more tinus to him. And if the ani is refusing to allow the building of the wall, the Ramah says the same din as in Siman Kuf Samach Dalet. Was in Siman Kuf Samach Dalet Sif Gimel. If a Bais V'Aliyah fell and one person can't afford to renovate his chelik, so the rich person could renovate it, and then he could use it himself until he gets paid the half of the expense. So here also, the rich person could build it on both of their properties, right in the middle. It could be koife, it says it could build it, and he has exclusive usage rights until the poor person pays his share. And the Smeh right away says that there is no chashash ribis, even though I'm going to get paid the full expense of the half a wall down the line, and I used half of your property, and at the end of the day I'm still going to get my $2,500 back, and for the next 3 years I still used it just alone. It's not considered ribis. Pamayin Zav explains why is it not considered ribis. Pamayin Zav goes at length. He says it is ribis, and he explains no. He says because Meikara there was no wall over here, there was no building, there was nothing there. So when it's built, there's not nikar. There's a shaila of ribis, and therefore you don't have to worry about it. The Siras HaMishpat comes over here with a very interesting din, that this is only if the Ashur, actually the rich person actually wants to pay it, or wants to do it. But if the rich person says, I'm not interested in laying out money for you, and I'm not interested in doing it my own wall. G'doir oitim koir, participate or sell to somebody who could afford to put it, just like in the end of Siman Kuf Nun Hey. The Nesiva says that he could be koife the ani to either borrow, steal, whatever works to be able to pay for the half a wall, or sell to somebody else who could afford it. And not only that, being that it's a chiyuv api chazal, so Bezdin could be yerid l'nchasov, especially since he's mazik begufay, and the shibud is on him, etc., etc. And then the Siva says that even though the Taz later on Sif, hey, it's mashma that you cannot kick somebody out of the property, then the Siva says, I'm going to explain in Sif, hey, why I don't agree with the Taz, and therefore the din is like this, that I could force him out of the property if he can't afford to build the wall. I personally don't understand what the logic of the Siva is to throw somebody out. It makes more sense like the Taz, especially like a Bais V'Aliyah, we don't say you throw somebody out, and any other source you don't throw somebody out of a G'doir. Mishtamish B'kuloi, yeah.
That's not throwing him out.
What?
No, I'm saying, what does it mean if he's Mishnah
He doesn't have a house, it fell down.
and then the usher rebuilds and he uses the whole house?
Yeah, but he doesn't lose his rights. You can't say that if you can't afford to participate, you lost your rights over here. Over here, now it happens to be this Oitzer HaMishpat came up with an interesting chap that maybe when the Nesiva says that Mechayv and Koifen Oisoi Limker, it doesn't mean to be Moicher the whole property, but it could mean to be Moicher a part of his property so he could afford to pay for the wall. The Ramah continues, if both of them are poor, they could use it the way it is, and each person should be marchik himself as much as possible because of Hezek Riyah. The Smeh then comes and says, Sifkot and Yud Aleph, I don't understand why the Ramah forgot something that the Tur mentioned. What did the Tur mention? The Tur mentions that they could take from tzedakah. to build at least a mechitza of hutza v'dafna, which is not made from reeds and from cheaper materials. He said, I don't understand why the Ramah skipped it. Before we're going to get to why the Ramah skipped it. Now, in Prisha, just if you look in Prisha, he explains something which was not explained over here. That, what does it mean, yarchik, each person should be marchik himself? It says, try to avoid going into the other person's half, if you're both poor, and try to not look when you can't. Now, where it says, the smell over there says, brings the Torah that you could take from tzedakah, then the Sivis quotes the smell, the halacha, and Aruch HaShulchan, and the Smeh quotes this halacha, the Aruch HaShulchan and Sif Gimel also quotes this halacha. The Aruch HaShulchan also says that it doesn't mean specifically Hutza v'Dafna, but it could be any form of separation that prevents Hezek Riyah. They're both poor people, so technically speaking, you just put up 2 poles and a sheet and it will work. The Parmoinei Zav says, goes into the Smeh, it discusses the Smeh, and he says, the Chayra from the Torah is mashma. What's the Torah trying to tell us? That if one person does not want to take from tzedakah, his friend could be koi for him to take from tzedakah. And he explains further that you could explain that maybe the kavanah of the Torah is not that each person could be koi for, but rather the Torah teaches that in hilchos tzedakah. That really both parties could agree to go to the tzedakah fund to get money for the wall. Elamai, the Torah is telling you it's the tzedakah fund could be used for these kind of things. It didn't hilchos tzedakah. Elamai, it's here, so he sticks it in over here. And the Parmenas Zav ends this paragraph as Tzorech. I'm not sure if the Torah wants to be koife, wants to teach us that you could be koife, or the Torah wants to teach us that it's a din hilchos tzedakah. But regardless, the Ramah didn't have to bring it either because he didn't agree that he could be koife, or because it doesn't think that it belongs in the. And then he says afterwards, I looked in Damascus Eliezer, and over there he explains it like the second way that the Parmenas Zav says that the Ramah, that the Torah holds that you can't be koife for anybody else. Rather, it's each person has a right to do it. Elamai is only trying to teach you a din hilchos tzedakah. And therefore, the Ramah was mashmated because the Ramah holds doesn't belong over here; belongs in hilchos tzedakah. If you look in Oitzer HaMishpat, he says that he gives an interesting chap that the reason why the Torah gives an example of hutza v'dafna, doesn't say koisel, it just says hutza v'dafna, is to teach you, following the kav that the Torah is teaching you hilchos tzedakah, you're going to take from tzedakah, you take the minimum that you need. You don't take a lot, but lav dafka that what he says is accurate. Sif Dalet, what's the width of the wall? We say the Mechaber says K'minhag HaMedina, and even if they were noyeg, the whole city is noyeg to do hutza v'dafna, then you do hutza v'dafna, as long as it's tight, the reeds are tight and you can't see through one to another. The Ramah says if the minhag was less than hutza v'dafna, yesh omrim, that you don't follow the minhag. And the Smeh explains why not. It's a minhag garua, and therefore if it's a minhag garua, you don't do it unless both agree. If there's no minhag, kefira ois hadayan, together al pi mumchim. If there's no minhag to determine if you make a hutza v'dafna, if you make it bricks, whatever has to be done, the kefira ois hadayan. What happens if you have the majority of the city has a minhag to do it with stones, and the minority of the city has a minhag to do it with little bricks, so it's narrower, wider. Shaila is, if you make it with stones, it's going to be a few inches wider than if you make it with the thin red bricks. So what do? Erech HaShulchan says you follow the Roiv. And then Beis Yaakov over here also says that you follow the Roiv. What happens if it's half-half? So Erech HaShulchan says, whoever wants to have more has to bring a Raya, why he's right. And the Beis Yaakov says, you go, being it's half and half, you go on the smaller share. You don't take away from other people. Rabbi Kiva Eger over here writes that you go based, when it says, it's only regarding the type of material used for the wall, but not regarding the width. Regarding, Here, it just says no. The Beis Yaakov says there's no mitzvah mechaber el varaya. The psak is you go after the smaller one, the cheaper one, the smaller one. He's not Mitzvah Chavere. The other one's not Mitzvah Chavere, it ends up being the same thing, but if he brings a good Raya, maybe it will work. Maybe he'll go and make a survey and he'll find there's 2 people more on one side than the other side. The Rabbi Kiva Eger over here says that when it comes to minhag, it's only regarding the type of material used for the mechitza. That means whether it's bricks, whether it's stones, whether it's what's of a dafna. But regarding the width of it, the shiur is like it says in the Mishnah, whether it's 6 tefachim or less or more, whatever it is, and we don't follow the minhag whether to make it wider, to make the thickness wider or narrower. And so is mashma from the tour that the Smet brings in Sifkat and Yud Gimel.
There's different options in the Mishnah, either 6 or 5 or 4.
Right, so he says, but it depends for what materials, right?
Say, whichever material you're using, then you have to use the size of the...
Yes, whichever material you use, you have to use the size. Because it can't be that they're going to decide on a material that the Mishnah says is 6, they're going to do it 3, minhag hamokim. That doesn't work. The Rabbi Kiva Eger says it doesn't fly. Avnei Choshen says that Taisus and Bava Basra is chaylik, but Taisus and Bava Basra says that the shear is only the maximum, but you could always make it less than the 654 that says in the Mishnah. And it seems from the Avnei Choshen that even in this you follow the minhag. Chochmas Shlomo, which is in the back from Shlomo Kluger, which is a beer on Choshen Mishpat, which is in the back of the Tur Shulchan Aruch that you have. He comes and he says, I didn't see anybody discussing if there's a minhag in height. Do we follow the minhag when it comes to height or not? Let's say if the minhag is to make it less than 4 amas high or make it more than 4 amas high, what's the din? So he says it's a minhag gerua both ways. If the minhag is to do more than 6, more than 4 amas, you don't need it for Hezekriya, so it's a minhag gerua. If the minhag is to make it less than 4 amas, it's also minhag gerua because it doesn't help you for Hezekriya. Therefore, you don't follow minhag one way or the other when it comes to height between chatzeres. But if it's between houses, he says, there used to be a wall between houses and it fell. One person says the minhag of the city is to make it 10 feet between the houses. Says that you do follow the minhag. Why? Because between chatzeres, it's only for Hezekriya. Between houses, it also adds in the beauty of the city. And therefore, if the minhag is to do it that way, then it works. I have a suffix if this is the same thing as in if when it comes to minhagim, we'll leave the minhagim aside for a second. Like I said before, if one person is tall, one person is short, both people are told they need to have more. If one is tall, one is short, does one person have to go higher than daled amas? Because by mechitza, the Rebbe says l'mayla mekaymas ish. Yeah, and the reason is because kaymas ish. Today, people are taller than 6 feet. Yeah. This is a shaila, you think about it yourself. If both of them are shorter, both of them are taller, if one is short, one is tall, who's responsible for it? And the Ramah continues, and finishes, I'm not going to finish a sif today, but the Ramah continues, if they made a kinyan to make a mechitza, you can't change your mind anymore. And it's not considered kinyan dvarim. And he says that Ramah holds that it is a kinyan dvarim, and you could be chayzer, and the Taz says Paskins that from the Taz it's mashma that we follow the Rameh, that it is considered a kinyan dvarim. Now, the Rameh himself says that if the kinyan was a kinyan is chayvus, it's not considered a kinyan dvarim. Why? He mechayiv himself to do it. Why? Either because it's a hoidah or because it's meshibud. But a kinyan to build or a kinyan to give a certain amount of money is tam a kinyan dvarim. The Vayalaket Yosef also in Choshen Mishpat brings the Raman. He says that the kuli alma if the kinyan is only to be a shutif or a kinyan lachlik, because for sure it doesn't help anything according to everybody, not only according to the Raman. The discussion over here is if the chiyuv, if it was mischayev to build a mechitza, if that's considered a kinyan dvarim or not. The Grov here adds that even according to the Rameh, if you're mischayev with the kinyan may achshav to give a specific amount of money towards building the wall, that even according to the Rameh would not be considered a kinyan dvarim. And with that we conclude today's share.